But first, well, now I can tell you, you saw my reaction last night when I finally saw that secret list of people that the Albanese government has invited to its Jobs and Skills Summit starting tomorrow. What a laugh. In fact, it was a bigger joke than I'd even predicted, hence my surprise last night. But I couldn't tell you the names then because the government had put an embargo on it. Needed to keep this secret for a few hours longer. I don't get it either, but now I can tell you. And I just wonder if Australians are really going to fall for this ludicrous and sinister con. Because this summit is a setup. The Albanese government has stitched it up so it can get what will look like a consensus for radical changes, but doing that by stacking this summit with union mates, left-wing activists and fellow travellers. And the few voices of opposition it's let in seem to be there mostly for the show, the mere appearance of a debate. Or maybe it's to, I don't know, make them feel and look completely out of touch. Now let's not sugarcoat this. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese lied before the election, less than 4 months ago, when he claimed that he already had a plan for jobs and skills.
Labor's plan to create jobs, plan for economic recovery. This ambitious plan starts with the heart of our skills sector. Forward-looking plan for a stronger, fairer and broader economic recovery.
In fact, Albanese had no plan, not publicly anyway, no plan for jobs and skills, and is instead inviting a cheer squad tomorrow to come up with one. Or maybe to agree to one he's been keeping secret. But this plan will be one that Australians never got to see before the election and never got to vote on. And that makes this summit anti-democratic. Let's just look at the 142 people Labor has now invited to give it an excuse for its new plan and an elephant stamp. To start with, these 142 people include 33 from the unions. That's almost a quarter of the delegates. A quarter, even though unions represent just 15% of workers. Now that of course is the most obvious part of the stack. But dig deeper. Also included are 6 Labor premiers and chief ministers, but only 2 Liberals. 2 left-wing think tanks, but no Conservative ones. No bank chiefs were invited. They are represented instead by a former Labor Premier, Anna Bligh, head of the Australian Banking Association. But 2 union-linked super funds were invited. And that's no surprise because one is Hester, whose chairman is former federal Labor Minister Nicola Roxon, and Australian Super, whose deputy chairman is president of our top union body, the ACTU. I'm gathering I'm not really surprising you, but it goes on. Also in the crowd of 142, handpicked by Labor, is a battalion of global warming activists and academics and green energy carpetbaggers. 2 Green senators, the Australian Conservation Foundation, the Smart Energy Council, West Coast Renewable Energy, green hydrogen spruiker Andrew Forrest, warming alarmist Ross Garnaut, and green investor Scott Farquhar. You getting the picture yet? Now remember, this was actually touted as a big brainstorm about how to get your wages higher and get trained workers to where they're wanted. The Jobs and Skills Summit, it's called. Yet among the delegates are not just a bunch of Greens, but 2 representatives from the Human Rights Council, 3 from big welfare groups like ACOS, 1 from the National Council of Single Mothers and their Children, 1 from the Equality Rights Alliance, 1 from the Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils, and there are no fewer than 6 delegates from Aboriginal organisations. Even Dylan Alcott, the wheelchair tennis champion, is there, plus 2 youth delegates who, to be honest, nice people though they are, I would not let anywhere near a plan to design our economy, not until they're at least a decade wiser. Now there's more, but I think you get the drift. Of course, there are going to be a few business representatives in the room who aren't green, who aren't scared of offending the new government, who aren't beholden, and who aren't greedy for the sugar hit of mass immigration. Cheap workers delivered fast, that's going to be on the agenda. But those few that are sort of like not in sync, they're going to feel like lepers here, unless they give in and go along with the Kumbaya vibe and an agenda that I guarantee will go way beyond just better wages for you. Because why else is one of the delegates an expert in gender law, for instance? Now, don't fall for the spin, that this is just a nation-building exercise, bringing people together in a noble cause for the country, getting people to at last cooperate in a way that the past Liberals, they wouldn't even try. Don't fall for that spin from Treasurer Jim Chalmers today.
Now, this is our big chance to put an end to a decade of needless conflict and division, missed opportunities and warped priorities.
I mean, nonsense. That's nonsense. In fact, Liberal Prime Minister Scott Morrison, he also got the ACTU and the bosses together to talk about, and what a coincidence, jobs and skills, industrial relations reform, training. He even thought the ACTU was serious about all this, that there was cooperation in the room.
Now, on industrial relations, I have been genuinely heartened by the constructive approach of employers and employees and business groups and unions working together in the ACTU with the government through this crisis to find practical solutions to keeping Australians in jobs.
Now, I wrote back then that Morrison was being played, and sure enough, even the tiny compromises that were finally hammered out then came to nothing when Labor said no in the Senate. Yeah, Labor said no. The same Labor that now says, now that it's in government at least, well, put your politics aside for the sake of the country, which translated means agree with the government.
I say to everybody with the Jobs Summit, leave the ideology and the old battles at the door.
Yeah, hypocrites. Yeah, Labor's just wanting to shame anyone who dares stand against the consensus that it is rigging at this summit. But the consensus now forming is actually ominous. I mean, you watch. The real agenda will be to say yes to mass immigration, yes to more union power, and yes to more gender politics. And that's stuff that, sure, a room of Labor's hand-picked elite, that's going to cheer it. But it's stuff that Labor did not dare to put to a vote of the Australian public less than 4 months ago. So much for democracy.